Wow, you guys, today's podcast is very different. I just interviewed a phenomenal woman named Mighty Mel, as she likes to go by very appropriately. She is an entrepreneur, motivational speaker who has had a brain aneurysm and a stroke and gone from having no bodily sensation, neck down, having only 5 words in her vocabulary, to speaking to large groups of people, inspiring them, helping other disabled entrepreneurs grow their online businesses. She has such a unique perspective on what she has been through, what she has asked for to create as her life and her business, and how that has shown up very differently than what she thought. In this podcast, I just sort of pressed record to start to get to know her. And I was like, we'll officially start the podcast later. But we just sort of rolled into the interview. So I'm going to leave it as is. So you'll hear us talk. And then it just kind of unfolds into getting to know her. So enjoy our conversation and me meeting a new friend. And please, as always, message me, message Mel, let us know how this episode contributed to you. And please share it with anyone that you think it will inspire. Welcome to the Shift Your Vibe to Thrive podcast. My name is Emily Evans Russell, and I'm a single mom, multiple 6-figure business owner, and master mindset and energy coach. I created this podcast with 2 main targets. 1, to give you practical tools so that no matter where you are in your life right now, you not only know that things can shift, but you know how to make them greater. And 2, to change your frequency so that you become an energetic match for everything you desire. I'm talking your relationships, your finances, your success, all of it. Think of this podcast as your weekly energetic upgrade with a mix of subconscious mind hacks, ways to quantum leap, and consciousness shifts. A place where you learn to sculpt your reality and actually finally truly have the magical life you deserve and one that works for uniquely you. Are you ready to uplevel your reality? I think I hear yes, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. Thank you so much for being here. And now let's go to the show.
Well, it's so attractive to watch 2 friends have a conversation, right? That's always be the outside person watching. And it's like, ooh, because it's always like, you always wonder what other people are like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I looked at that when I started the podcast. I was like, okay, how do I want people to feel when they're listening? And of course, it's always, I want them to get information, but I was like, I want them to feel like they just had a great conversation with a good friend or listened to one, and had that experience. So it's ended up being, and I just recorded one on Saturday. That was it was the same thing. We were bundled up, we had our tea and we just had a chat, and it's my favorite one I've recorded so far. So I'm excited to do this. And it's fun because they get to I'm going to ask questions that I don't know. And as the audience would want to know, because I don't know them about you. So it's really cool. People get to know you while I do,
I was just listening to your podcast on the way here. I listened to them all and they're so good. Your voice is so warm. And I was just I was like, oh, I wish I sound like her. That's the aphasia part of me is I want to say one word, another word comes out. And I swear my godfather was hilarious, Gerard. And he had brain surgery and he died, right? When he was dying, I was on the bed beside him in the hospital and promised to him that he's going to watch me and have a good show for him because he's going to watch us. And he's also hilarious. He was dying from cancer and the whole room, we have a big family. So there's 30 of us in the hospital. We're not allowed to, but they all love us. So there's 30 of us in there. And Gerard would wake up and he had about 30 seconds, maybe 2 minutes. And he have us all laughing. And then he would fall asleep again. And he would sleep for 15, wake up, make us laugh, fall asleep. So when I have my brain aneurysm and a stroke and survivor and all these things, and this aphasia, so that means that when I'm saying a word, something else comes out. And I swear it's Gerard. I'm in a meeting, right? So I'm doing a big meeting, marketing and sales with a team of people, and I'm trying to say the word and orgasm comes out. And I was like, no, orgasm is not the word. And everyone's laughing hysterically. And so I'm just like, oh, Gerard. Like,
That's so funny because I think I saw on your Instagram one of your videos and I saw you reference Gerard and I was like, I wonder if that's what she calls her brain because I just had another guest on. She has a name for her like subconscious mind when it kind of sneaks in and tells her she can't do things. But that's so cool to know it's actually your godfather who's now passed.
well, because it's so embarrassing and that I can't control my voice. Like I'm trying to say something and else comes out. And so you change the story of what it is, right? So instead of being like, oh, I can't even control my own mouth. And then I'd be like, oh, Gerard, you're hilarious. Like,
Wow.
because there's so many times where I'm like, our brain puts the exact opposite in the same place in our brain. So when you're looking, or that starts with the same O. So instead of organizing, I can't even say that right now. Organizing, orgasm comes out. It was like, oh yeah, that's funny because it starts with an O. And like right after I was still building two houses and the builder beside us saw us and he's walking towards me and I was like, oh, you're looking fat. And he looked at me. I thought he was saying fit, but fat. And he's laughing. And he's like, only you could call me fat. Like just, oh,
I love these stories. And when you said you get to rewrite the story, because one of the most powerful things we have is the ability to storytell and tell powerful stories. And so for everyone listening, like I don't know Mel. I met Mel through Instagram. Like she reached out, we started talking, and all I did was I think I looked on your Instagram and saw a little bit about what you did. And I was like, will you come on the podcast? So
is that where we have the same coach, right?
yes. So we both have done business coaching with James Wedmore. He has a great podcast. If you don't know
so
him,
good.
called Mind Your Business. Have a listen. So Mel reached out and said, hey, I also, study with him. What are you doing? What are you creating? And so today, I know you don't have video on this podcast, but we're both sitting here with our fires on, our cup of coffee. And I'm going to get to know Mel just as you do as we chat on this podcast. So tell us a little bit about, you've already referred to having a stroke, a brain aneurysm. Tell us your story of that, what you do now, so we can all get to know you.
Yeah, it's a boring story, just this like everyday thing. And it's so interesting because this story will, like I've told this story a lot of times, but this will be different because of the energy that you talk about. And so my story is going to be a little bit different because the morning when my head exploded and I was feeling the top of my life. Like I was like, this is the best. I run 3 businesses and all the things that went wrong. We were building 2 houses and 2 of the investors had no money. There was a con artist, like the builder Phil fired all his employees. And we actually had a conversation that, and this is the part that it's a bit because now I'm separated and I always tell, so I had a conversation with my ex that it's like, okay, we're either going to go all in and we're going to lose everything or we can make about 50,000. Like, let's go. We're young. If we lose everything, if we lose everything, as long as we can buy condoms, we'll be fine. And he's like, they always give us free condoms. We'll be fine. And we're like, okay, like that was actually like, when you start a project, you're like, what's the worst that can happen? What's the best that can happen? And like all the stuff that went through, it was amazing. And sorry, I believe that everything that happens for a reason and all these problem that you solve makes you a little stronger. And every time something happens, it's like, oh, everything is right there. Just look around and ask the people around you because they're right there. And so this morning we were 2 weeks away. We were told we were done. And we thought we were going to make 50,000. Instead, we were going to make 250,000. We're like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. Like, and I was manifesting that day. This is my future. And I made this list and this is all the things that I'm going to go. And I was painting and I'm meditating and talking to my higher self. And my higher self is like, yeah, you can have everything in your list. Do you want it to do fast or slow? And I was like, fast? Yeah. And they're like, okay, it's going to be the hardest thing that you want. I'm like, have you seen what I did? Like I do hard things all the time. I got this. And they're like, okay, scream, you're going to die. And I was like, what? And instantly, it's like one of those times when time slows down. And it's like about 2 seconds where I couldn't feel anything from my neck down. And I was able to crumpled once. There was a door door right in front of me that I put my head off and I screamed because all I could do, like instantly, I couldn't feel anything down. And I'm scream and scream and scream. And I was so tired that I was like, okay, I'm just going to take it out. They're like, okay, it's way easier to be an angel right now. But if you don't scream, you're going to die. So you need to choose. So I was like, okay. So I continue to scream the biggest scream. And I would love, like, when my ex found me, I wish I'd be like, oh, take me that. No, oh no. I was screaming because like I couldn't move my body from my neck down. And he's pulling me out. And I was like, take me to the hospital now. I'm not okay. And he's like, oh, this is stress. I was like, no, take me to the hospital now. And then I blacked out. And luckily, one of my best friend was 2 blocks away and he's a firefighter. So he came over and he's supporting my ex, and my husband was supporting my kid. By the way, my kid is an autism kid, a level 1 autism kid. So could you imagine your kid would have found me? My 9-year-old would have found me screaming. And the like all these things that happen, like this story is so big, but so they brought me over to the hospital and they couldn't believe that I'm still here. And they had to brought me to another hospital because they couldn't do the surgery. And then they flew me to another one. And it was like, that was another thing on my list, is that I wanted someone in my list that I wanted. Like at 9 weeks, I realized I just got everything on my list. Everything on my list that I wanted, that I was manifesting, it happened in the 9 weeks when I was living in the hospital. I was like, you always get everything you wanted, but it looks totally different. Like I wanted someone to fly me just for me. Well, that's what I did to get my surgery. I was
my goodness.
you know, like I wanted my mom and my dad to come and visit me and spend weeks at a time with me. Well, they did because they had to look after me. like just because when I was in the hospital, I was running 3 businesses and I had a kid. And so my parents flew to look after my kid and I got to spend weeks at a time. Like,
wow.
everything.
Those were literally things you had on your list.
It was. And I was just like, that's the one thing that it's like when you ask, you have to be careful.
Yeah.
You get everything what you want, but it's going to look different. And I would make art. And when I was doing art, I would manifest doing it. And it's interesting because so as I'm painting or making art, I'm always manifesting and asking and talking to my higher self and gods and the angels and all that stuff. And it's so interesting. So one of the things that I was doing that I spent a lot of time manifesting is this painting called My Love. And I always called my husband and kid my love. And when I was painting it, I manifesting my future and what kind of relationship and thinking. And now we've separated after 20 years and I'm moving across Canada. And it's so interesting that I'm sort of like looking at that painting of like, okay, what have I done? When you manifest, you find something. Do you think back and you're a little bit afraid of what's going to happen?
Well, I love it's, I've definitely had times where I've asked for things like you said, and they always, I love that you said that, they always show up differently than you think they're going to. And sometimes I've had things show up and I'm like, oh, that's not really what I thought I wanted to ask for.
Yeah.
But, I'm also divorced, and it's so easy in hindsight, though. I see the gifts of everything, of like why I chose him and what, and the dad he is to my girls and all of that. So often, sometimes when things are confusing in the moment, and you could probably speak to this too, I just say, okay, I'm really excited for the future when I get to see this in a new perspective and I can see how all of this is actually working for me. Cause right now it doesn't seem like that,
Yeah,
but it
it
will
sucks.
later. It always does. Right. So
Yeah.
that's, you had a brain aneurysm then at that
Mhm.
point, right?
Yeah.
So what are the 3 businesses you were running? And then how did you keep going? Cause now I know you coach and yeah, tell us about then what happens after that.
A lot. Well, it's so funny because you think running a business is really about self-development, right? Like that's the biggest thing that happens. Like, oh, I think I want to run a business, but really what you need is self-development and mindset and change. And I always think of these stories of, when someone gives you a gift and you think it's a stupid gift and it turns out it's the best thing that you've ever had. And it's like, oh my goodness, I didn't know I needed to live with this. Right. And so when something sucky happens, I go to that moment. I'm like, okay, this is going to be my favorite gift. Like, oh my goodness, just wait. And when you tell your brain, like when you give those instructions of like, this is going to be my favorite gift. You just wait. And then our brain starts to solve that problem and
Yeah.
find reason. Brain aneurysm, if you know what is that, it's like there's a balloon in the back of my head, and the balloon of blood exploded. So that's a brain aneurysm. And it was so massive that it basically takes your brain and puts it in water, which there's electric in there. It doesn't do good things. And there's sort of a joke of like, if you're going to do something, do it. Like if you're going to brain aneurysm, freaking do it, right? Like you're going to and I couldn't move my body from my neck down. And in the hospital, oh, it's funny. Like when I woke up in the hospital, I thought I was watching Grey's Anatomy. Do you remember the Grey's
Yeah.
Anatomy? The voice of the guy who had a brain aneurysm, right? So I thought I was watching that show, and I thought the guy was the dreamy husband and the kid, and watching the 9-year-old walk up to the husband and saying, she's going to be fine, don't worry. And then nothing happened. And I was looking for a clicker. Like I was looking to like, I want to change, like, what is
Change the
going on
channel.
with Grey's Anatomy? Nothing's happening. They're just crying. Like, and then all of a sudden I realized it was like, oh, this isn't a show. This is me. And I instantly was standing beside myself, watching all these people working on me. And I was like, okay, like, and I'm an entrepreneur, right? So I think of everything like an entrepreneur. So all I can control is my brain. So I'm into my brain. I imagined I had a team of employees, and I found a box, and I sat on the box and I gave the motivational speaker telling these employees your goal, and this is what we're going to happen. There's no reason we can't feel my body from my neck down. And I set my employees to look over my whole body, and they all test all the nerves and came back and then the manager came up to me in my head and he's like, okay, like the damage is so big for us to wake up our body. We have to give you a stroke and we need to delete something. And he's like, okay, you're highly educated. You spent $150,000 on educate. Let's delete that. And he's like, whoa, no, do not delete English, do not delete my education. That's the most valuable. I'm like, okay, what stories? Oh, you have so many stories from all over the world. I was like, no, I need those stories. They're like, okay. And he's like, what about English? Can we delete English? And I was like, I was always horrible at English. Maybe if I learned it this way, it would be better. So go for it. Delete it. Oh yeah. So I woke up from my stroke. It woke up my body, but I had 5 words. I couldn't read. I couldn't understand. I couldn't, even when people speak to me, I couldn't hear. When people talk to me, I hear wah, 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 wah. So like I had 5 words, but I didn't know because our brain gives this delusion. So I didn't know how bad I was because I was saying 5 words, but everyone else was, I had Hayden Taylor, that's my kid and my husband.
Okay.
Awesome. Yes. And Duff. And so Duff was every other word. So when I was saying, I thought I was talking fine, I was saying Duff, 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 Duff. Awesome. Like that's what everyone else
Wow.
heard.
So you had a stroke in the hospital, like the brain
Yeah.
aneurysm put you in the hospital. At that point, you can't move. You have the stroke, and now you have access to your body, but like all the language function is gone.
It's more complicated that. So the first brain surgery they did, you can see there's like a hole here. So they have a drill here to give pressure out. So they
She's
did
pointing
that.
to like the front of her head, kind of where your part is. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
right. The front of my head. And what's interesting is when I was born, I had a strawberry on my head. So it looks like a candy on the top of my head. So the same place that they brain surgery when I was a baby,
Is
there
your
was,
birthmark.
yeah, like
Wow.
super weird. Okay, so that was my first. So they drove me to another to do brain surgery. So they drill in my head, and then they put me in airport, and they flied me either to another airport, and then they put coils. So they put metal in the back of my head, and that's another thing. When I was in university, I did a bust of myself, and I did a metal square on the back of my head, and I was screaming. And that's where my brain surgery is. Like, it's so
That's a
interesting.
sculpture you made? Like a
Yeah,
sculpture? Wow.
in ceramics. I did, and it's creepy. It's a weird, creepy of me screaming with a metal square in the back of my head. And that's where they put metal in my head. Like, it's super.
Wow. Can I just pause you in the story to say, for people listening, what I'm loving about this podcast is I'm having people on from all sorts of backgrounds and their perspective on energy and how they receive information. Because you've given us a lot of ways that you've heard what's happening to your body. Like that example of the sculpture, we would like, you kind of knew the future, but you didn't know what it was at the time. And you've talked about talking to your higher self. And I just want to invite everyone, we all have different words for talking about all this. So you might say higher self, someone else might say God, someone else might say source. When I hear you talking about hearing voices, that's one of the ways some of us get our intuition or our knowing or whatever you want to call it. But I love this because everybody experiences the world differently, and they experience energy differently, and they experience their intuition or knowing differently. So I just want to say thank you for like this dive into your world. And not only is your story phenomenal, but also how you've experienced it. It's very unique that you're like, oh yeah. And then when they put coils in my head, I happen to have done a sculpture of myself. Like that. You have such a light perspective, which is really beautiful. Okay. So that's part of the aneurysm surgery, right? When they put the coils in.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they flew me. And so they flew me to another city because there was only 5 people in all of Canada that can do it. And they said, well, if she makes the night, because I can't believe she's still here.
Yep.
And luckily I was the fittest of my whole life because we were building 3 houses and we couldn't hire enough people. So if we couldn't, I was doing the job. So I had like a muscle. I had six pack. I had the biggest muscles I've ever in my life. And I was like, that's partly why I survived, And then I was waiting for the brain surgery, and my family was flying across Canada, and someone else needed my surgery. So I had to wait another day, and everyone's freaking out. I was like, and I'm screaming, I'm praying for that person, like, oh, they need it more than me. That's okay. I'll wait. And then I was there for weeks in the hospital. And the thing is when you go from one hospital to another, they don't talk to each other. So when I was in the one hospital where I couldn't move my body neck down, and I was just starting to walk, like there was a week where I wanted to walk to the bathroom on my own. And it was so funny because I was just had a stroke. So my body just started waking up, and they can't believe that I can walk. But I was like, I didn't like that they had to clean there's a little bag they put all your pee in. And I was like, oh, like, I'll just go to the bathroom. They're like, do you want to? And I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And they're like,
You have to
okay.
do the pee bag.
Pardon?
You didn't want him to have to do the pee bag.
Yeah, I'll go to the bathroom. Like, I'm not lazy. I'll just go to the bathroom. But I couldn't move my body from my neck down, right? So the nurse is like, okay, I'll go with you. And I was like, fine. And she brought me a walker. I'm like, I don't need that. They're like, if you want to walk to the bathroom, you need to have a walker. And I was like, okay. And I'm trying to get off the bed, but my body isn't quite listening. So I'm like, I'm picking up my legs and I'm putting on the side of the bed. And then I'm trying to stand up, but my body isn't listening. So I'm trying to stand up and my arm is moving. And I'm trying to move my left leg and my right arm is going up. And it's like, what the heck? And I had to then I remembered I took a Pilates class and they talked about how you walk. And so I knew how to tell my body what muscles to move. And I was sitting there telling each muscle and right leg, left leg. And it was like the longest walk to the bathroom. And so right, left, right, left. And then I got to the bathroom and they gave me a walker. So I took a little nap on the toilet. And then the nurse woke me up and she's like, oh, right. And then I went to the bathroom. And I get back up again. I start walking. And then I stopped looking at the sink because you're supposed to wash your hands. And I'm just looking like, how am I going to hold this walker and wash my hands? And the nurse is like, it's okay. Next time. I'm like, okay. So I went to the bath and I fell in the bed and I was like, went to sleep again for another hours. And it's one of those days when I'm having a horrible day, when your day sucks, I go to the bathroom and I celebrate because like, dude, I just did that on my own. And it's a big joke now, right? It's like when you have a bad day, go to the bathroom and then celebrate like a little kid because we're not going to be able to do that our whole life, right? Like as we get older, we're not going to be able to do those things. So like, why not celebrate these simple things now, right?
Well, wow, you've had a perspective where you can actually see that and be grateful for it. I mean, when it's taken away and then you get it back easily, like, okay, now I can do this. So, one of the things you do, like you've mentioned, you're an entrepreneur, you had all these businesses, you still do. And now you help other people that are disabled grow online businesses, correct?
Yes. Yeah. That's my mission. Because when I was in the hospital and at 6 months, they tell you this is who you are. Like, this is who Melanie, you have 25 words. Luckily, 3 of your businesses. So, one of my businesses, we were developing. So, we were renovating houses, we're building new houses. That was one of their business, but I was running it. The other business was photography. So for 20 years, I was commercial photography, weddings, families. I won awards, like I freaking love it. My other one was marketing and sales. So I did graphic design, marketing, sales for businesses. And so at the hospital, they're like, Melanie, your brain damage is so much. You have 25 words. This is who you are the rest of your life. You can never be an entrepreneur. And they said, because every entrepreneur, there's so much stress. So you have to run, because that's the thing as an entrepreneur. Okay, I hear that you're telling me I can't. So give me a list of why I can't so I can check them off my list.
Right. So I can change all those. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me why. And then I will solve all these problems, right? That's what an entrepreneur does. Like, here's the problem. Let's fix it. And this team of professional people helping me to recovering, telling me that I can never be an entrepreneur. You can only be an employee. You can be a photographer. You make amazing photos. You can still do that. You don't need a lot of words for that. And I was like, okay. So I'm listening to them, but I couldn't stop crying. When you're so low that you can't even stop crying, like your whole body is shaking because you're so low and I couldn't stop crying. And I was like, okay, it's sunny outside. Vitamin D. So I went in the backyard and I'm sitting in the sun crying and I'm talking to myself. I'm like, okay, you're fine. You can be an employee. You can just photography. This is what you're doing. But I couldn't stop crying. And I swear, Zig Ziglar, do you know who Zig Ziglar is?
I know the name, but no.
Zig Ziglar, he's a motivational speaker.
Thank you.
So this old Zig Ziglar was standing beside me telling me, he's like, you have a great story. You could be a motivational story. And I'm like, oh, I forgot. Like when I used to run sales teams, we used to listen to these tapes. Do you remember tapes?
Yes.
How long it goes? And I thought, I'm like, that would be the coolest job to be a motivational speaker. Like, it's your job to make people happy. That'd be so cool. And I was like, yeah, I have a great story. But can you imagine me coming back to my speech therapist when I have 25 words and I come up and he's like, she's like, you're glowing. What did you do in this weekend? I'm like, cried. She's like, what? Idea. And then I drew a picture of me on stage with her arms up. And I said, like Zig Ziglar. She's like, a motivational speaker? You want to be a motivational speaker? And I was like, yeah, I'd be good. She's like, I'm afraid you're going to fail. That goal is too big and you're going to fail. And then you're going to, like, I'm so worried. No. And I was like, but the thing is that they didn't know there's a difference between a dream and a goal. So your goal, tiny little things that you do every day, where a dream is so freaking big that you can't even get it done your whole life. And so at that time, my goal was to be in front of stage in front of 400 people. That was my goal. And I thought that was the biggest thing. And then a year and a half later, I was in stage of 400 people screaming. And I was like, oh, my dream was too small.
Yeah.
Like, we always think our dream is big until we get it and we realize how small it is.
Well, oh my gosh. And at the time though, that dream was so big, your speech therapist was like, no, don't even go there. But I think that says something about you. And I think for a lot of us, I know,
Entrepreneurs.
right? You need a dream or vision big enough to pull you, like, so that vision and that dream pulls you and like that's big enough for me to go for. Whereas if you were just like, okay, I'm going to add 100 new words to my vocabulary this week, it's like, for you, that obviously wasn't big enough. So then you get to the speaking in front of 400 people. Now what did you ask for? Like, what, where did you go from there?
Well, it's still the dream is bigger, right? Because, right back with that's the thing. The stories go all over the place. So
I love this. This is how I like talking. So I love this, like, roundabout. Okay. And now we're here.
Because I want to talk about our coach, like finding someone, like my team of people who told me that I can't, where I'm just like, okay, I need to be surrounded with people who are going to believe in it. So I checked out 50 business coaches before I found ours, because I would find people that were amazing. And I was like, okay, you're the one. And when I told them my story and what I'm doing, they were looking at me with their eyes big and they're like, I can't help you. Or they had too much ego or too much like, go, go, go. Where James, he's the perfect balance of drive and balance, like this being aligned, like the less you do, the more money you make, like this stress-free, joyful. It's not, I don't know, like it's just.
Well, and I will definitely put James Wedmore's, who we're talking about. I know we mentioned him earlier in the podcast, and I'll put his link below. But I agree, like I have been exposed to a lot of people and different coaches and different modalities. And I also was really drawn to him because, like you said, he has all of this practical information. And also, hey, here's all this info, but you don't have to work so hard, like you said, and burn yourself out. And how do you do this while doing what you love? And I love all of the energetic stuff. He calls it like the Wedmore woo woo, but like, it's because business and entrepreneurship, like you said earlier, it's a path of self-development and growth. Really, as you grow, your business can grow, and who you reach.
I love his business. The name of it, Business by Design. And I feel like I am the custom business by design, right? Because I have to be so custom, because I have to be so careful that everything that I'm doing, because often I only have 1 hour today. And when you have brain damage, it comes and goes when you can do stuff and you can't. So like sometimes I can read and understand, but most of the time I can't. And your identity changes instantly. And so when I was in the hospital at 6 months, I was like, okay, when brain aneurysm happened, they gave me a 95 chance of dying, less than 1% to walk and talk again. So at 6 months, I was like, oh, what are the numbers now? Like, I want survivor numbers. So I was like, and I Googled and they said, oh, with a brain aneurysm, there's only 30% death, but at 6 months, 60% of dying. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And I was looking at the hospital because I was still taking courses every day. And I was looking at everyone else in the recovering, and their identity's gone. Who they were was gone all of a sudden. And they're so sad. And everyone was taking depression pills. And then I was looking and they kept asking me what I'm taking. And I was like, nothing. And I was like, I'm an entrepreneur. That's why I'm waking up. And because when I looked around everyone in the hospital, I was like, when you're an entrepreneur, you see an entrepreneur everywhere. So when I see these stroke survivors, I see how I can make a business with that. I can see that you're damaged and you need a team. But when you run a business, you surround you with people that are smarter than you, can do the things that do better than you, and you do the things that you're good at. So for me, an entrepreneur is the perfect place recovering. But it's not set up for us because no one believes you can. And I think that the messed part of me is that I want to prove them wrong, because when your gut says you can, I was like, okay, I hear you, but my gut says yes. So I'm pretty sure I can do it. And I've been working on this for 5 years, and I'm so mad that it's been 5 years. And then my friends remind me, like, Melanie, 5 years ago, you couldn't even walk and talk and you had 5 words. And I flew across Canada. I divorced after 20 years together, and I'm building a new life together, even though I can't do things myself. Like, sometimes I can't read and understand. You know, when you go into stores now, you have to pay for your stuff and work yourself out. Like,
Yeah.
you have to pay.
Like
the
self
Yeah,
checkout.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I had a big day, but I had to buy something for my kid, medicine for my brother's kid, right? So I went to the store to pick it up for them, but an alarm came off, caution, blah, blah, blah. And I couldn't understand it. So I asked someone else, like, oh, can you help me? And she's like, she started talking to me really fast. And he's like, I'm sorry, I have brain damage. Can you say it slower? And she's like, says it faster. And I was like, and I'm like, so when you talk to me, I hear wah, 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 wah. And she started screaming at me. And I was like,
Wow.
what? And I didn't know what was happening. So she's yelling at me, telling the security has to come. And I was like, what? And the guy beside me, he was like, no, she's disabled. She needs to help her. And I was like, oh, because I wasn't screaming or anything. It's just those moments when you have brain damage, you look drunk, you look like there's something wrong with you. People don't understand this, and you have to advocate yourself. Well, how do you do that when you don't have voice? And it feels like, okay, I need to educate the whole world on how to treat with people. Like, if you're treating with someone and you think they're drunk, if you can ground yourself and start speaking slower, then they're not drunk, they have brain damage. And if you slow down and you ground yourself, you can solve them and fix them, because it's so embarrassing that I can't buy the medicine and read this alarm and give them, like, it's so embarrassing that I used to run 3 businesses and now I can't even buy this one thing. And
You say embarrassing, which I know in this reality it is, but as you're speaking here on this podcast so eloquently and making it like you're able to see all this not as an embarrassment, but as a way to empower you and others. I get in the moment like, okay, this is embarrassing, but your strength and resilience to keep going and then see the gift, not only just the gift of this, but now it's like, okay, how do I help other people do this? I'm going to have a business helping other people that are disabled grow their business. So do you find other entrepreneurs that are disabled and help them grow? Or do you sort of approach people that, hey, have you ever thought about having a business?
That is what I'm working on right now.
Okay.
So I'm just in the beta building my business. Like, that is what I'm working on. But the first thing is that I have to be able, as a disabled person, to run a business and to do all those things, even though I can't read and understand. And some days I have 5 minutes a day that I can actually do stuff. And some days I can 12 hours. Like it comes and goes, and you have to listen to your body and your limits. And I have to make sure I feed and get rid of stress and emotion. And cold makes it worse. And so it's freezing cold. I live in I live in Winnipeg right now. So I'm having to figure out how to advocate for myself, how to figure out how to do everything myself. And then once I can do it for me, I can do for other people. Like
Right.
running a business, that's easy, like marketing, sales, like, oh, and it's funny because if you talk to me about sales and marketing, you will notice there's nothing wrong with me. I will be fast, go. And then it's funny if I talk about things that are emotion, or if I'm tired or if lots of stimulation, you will clearly say that I'm brain damaged. Like it's
What part of, it's funny, just yesterday, I watched a TED talk with a woman who had a aneurysm on the left side of her brain, and she's actually a neuroscientist.
oh
And
yeah, she's amazing.
have you seen? Yes. And so
Yeah.
she talks about, while she's waiting for the ambulance, having no left brain function and having this experience completely right brain, which is like where you are pure oneness and consciousness, and all of that linear logical stuff is gone. And it's such a beautiful TED talk. And I just listened to that yesterday, and here I am talking with you. And when you talk about what part of your brain was the aneurysm in, so you notice that emotional and those things are more affected.
Yeah. So the part that's really interesting is that the way the universe always set you up to win, right? Is because I had a level 1 autism kid. So with my kid, I was always learning about the brain and psychology. As
Yep.
entrepreneurs, you're always looking at marketing, graphic design, and psychology, right? But then as a mom, and you want to solve and figure things out. So I learned so deep on our brain and how it works and how it connects into our body. And so when I was in the bed, only be able to, for my neck down, I knew how to reconnect all those nerves. There's things like when after my brain aneurysm and I couldn't move my body from my neck down, there was a room of team doing everything. My heart was at 25. There was breathing for me. There was eating me through my nose. Like machines did everything for me. And in that tube came in breathing for me. I remember saying that I needed to exercise these muscles. So I was fighting those tube that was in there so when I was in a coma, I was fighting the tube to exercise those muscles. So when they took it out, I could eat, because that was a huge thing after. And it's so funny because the people sitting me watching me, I was in a coma for 2 weeks with that tube breathing for me. And they're sitting beside me, hearing me because I was fighting the tube on purpose. But like all the time that I was in a coma, I remember all these lessons of like, sports people, right? When they practice a sport, if they practice in their head, their muscles get 70, or I think it was 90% just as good as if they were doing it.
You actually recall consciously the thoughts and things you were doing while you were in a coma. Like you
Oh
remember,
yeah.
holy,
Yeah.
wow,
Well, one
phenomenal.
of my clients before that, which is so interesting, is my client before that was a medium. And I did design for her for years and years. And she was an amazing teacher. And she told me that I was a top level medium, but I never called myself that. Like I didn't. And for me, I'm connected into my subconscious. I can read people. But all of those lessons with that client who taught me how to connect to our subconscious and our spirits. And it was like, I truly believe that everything's set for you to win. Either you have, if no one's helping you, it's because you have all the skills, you can do it yourself. And if you can't do it, if you ask the people around you, they can help you. Like it's amazing the people that show up when you ask. And
Wow,
it's
your
just
story
amazing.
is such a beautiful example that no wonder you you teach that and coach with that, because your story, like you said, all of that training you did about the brain, the entrepreneurial way of looking at things as you're recovering in the hospital, the working with the medium. It's so amazing that we really truly are being set up for success. It's like, I always think of in a video game where you go and you collect all the secret charms that later help you at the final, like the final thing. And you realize, oh my gosh, I'm actually really well equipped for this. I just didn't know it. Your
Right.
story is such a beautiful example of that.
Well, that's the thing, right? You get everything you wanted, but it's going to look different that you want. And often we're not happy about it because we have the expectations of it's going to look this way, it's going to happen. And it's so funny because the world knows how strong you are. And if they keep having challenge, it's because you're strong and you're capable of doing it. Although at the same time, it's like, okay, come on. Like, I think I'm strong enough. Okay, guys. But like,
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see like where you go next on your journey. I'll have to have another podcast with you in the future. Like, where is Mel now? Like, where are you at, with your with building this beautiful business. And I want to ask you, I like to ask people a couple questions at the end of every
yeah.
podcast. One of which is, where's your favorite place that you've ever traveled or would like to? You could answer either way because it inspires you, it gives you wherever you'd like to go with that.
I've done lots of traveling, but still going to my families. Like, I just love my family so much. My dad came from a family of 11, and my mom had a family of 6, right? So like,
Wow.
and then they separated and married. So like at Christmases, there's like about 70 people that I see on Christmas from the multiple families that I see. So I grew up in the north. So there's a town called Gillum. So just about where the white bears are, like so far up, like it's winter for most of the year, right? And we would get on this tiny little plane and you would fly back. And I thought my family lived in the clouds. I thought that's where my family lived.
The clouds in the North Pole with the polar bears.
Yeah, right. Like that's where I grew up, right? And anyway, so like we only saw our family once a year, but one of the brilliant thing that my mom did, because we didn't know them very much, and there's like 50 people that I had to talk to every year, once a year as a little kid. And my mom's like, these people are the most famous people in the world. I can't believe you get to see these people. And I still have that every time I see one of my family, that I feel like I get to see the most famous person in the world. They're just so amazing. Of course, they're just normal human, but like
I
I
love
just,
that. Your mom is so smart. And what a testament to, it's all just perspective, how you go in. So family reunion, guess what? All these people are famous. And a kid, I'm sure as a kid, you're like, awesome. I'm going to meet everybody. So
totally.
smart.
Well, and it's funny too, when you live in the North, everyone becomes your family, right? So I didn't realize that the people on our block, my mom's friends were always at her house all the time, and we called them aunts and uncles. So I didn't realize that they were not aunts and uncles. So my teacher, I remember I was about 7, that my teacher was telling us about DNA and we had to draw a picture of all the people that are uncles and aunts. And then you have to look, what part of DNA did you get from each person? But I didn't know the people on our block were not actually my uncle's uncles. So when I drew a picture of those people, there's like a black guy and a yellow and like purple, like all these different, it's like, oh, I'm a black man. They're like, there's no way you're a black, like, no. And yeah, I didn't realize they're not actually my uncles and ankles, but yeah.
Oh, I love the way your mind works. This is so good. Okay.
Oh, it's all about like my parents are marketing and sales. Like it's all about changing the story. And yeah.
It's so beautiful. Okay, then here's your last question. You can what is either a book or a movie or a song that inspires you or that you love?
Oh, I love books. I'm in love with books.
Oh,
Like there's a book that I read every year called Multiplier. It's a leading people. Like it's a really good managing people business. That's one that I read but I
Every
probably,
year.
pardon?
Every year. Okay, we'll put a link to that one. I haven't read that one. I'm going to add that to my list.
Oh, it's so good. How about you? Is there a book that you read every year?
Oh, and no, I've never reread a book every year. And I change. So that's why I love asking this question, because depending on when you would ask me these, I would probably have a different response all the time. Right now, I'm reading Life-Changing Conversations, which is a book I'm sort of fascinated with by Dr. John Connolly. A lot of it's like about talking to the subconscious mind and changing that with something called RRT, which I love. So but I always
good.
love marketing, like new entrepreneurial books. And like you said, they kind of all go together, whether it's here's how you do this in marketing or here's how you change yourself. It really is about growing your life and growing your reach and growing your impact, which I want to just say thank you for coming on here and sharing your story. And if people want to reach out to you, we'll make sure to put all the links that, to reach out to Mel. Is there anything else you'd want to let people know about before we go?
Well, if you look up, if you hashtag Mighty Mel, you can find me and mostly on Instagram and YouTube.
Just thank you so much for coming on and sharing your really unique story, but even more unique, your perspective and how you're using all of this to really go after your next big dream, whatever that may be. And so I'm excited to follow it.
Oh, I want to change the world. I want to educate people to help with brain damage, to help people to understand and to accept them and to prove that they can. There's really like that, I don't know, maybe that's just an entrepreneur that when they tell you can't, you want to find a reason to, like.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you so much, Mel. I hope you got something out of that episode. If you like this podcast, please share it with someone you know who'd find it useful or interesting, and subscribe so that you can listen to past and upcoming shows.